Well, I'm also into hearing what's going on with Amazon. So there's a lot of news that I can't wait for you to share with our audience. So go ahead, Nando.
All right. Well, the coronavirus pandemic has been a disaster for almost everyone, but one company in particular has made out like gangbusters.
COVID has been basically a gift to Amazon, teaching people who weren't previously shopping online how to shop online and how to consume content over the top. So it's probably been a pretty good tailwind for their businesses, and they should be gaining share through this.
That's right. COVID has been a gift to Amazon as people were forced to stay home and thus rely on America's largest online retailer for all of their shopping needs. And the numbers are really, truly staggering.
Just want to jump in with some Amazon numbers here, guys. We're going to go into these in more detail, but just a couple of key headline numbers. Revenue, $89 billion, just under that, 88.9. Forecast was for $81.4 billion. Of course, that was already an elevated forecast.
And that $89 billion in Q2 revenue meant that Amazon made $5.2 billion in profit in a single quarter. And then in Q3, its profit went up to $6.3 billion. Remember, that's per quarter. So you can multiply that number by 4 to figure out more or less annual profits. And of course, all of that has been very, very, very good for Amazon's chief executive and the richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos.
Jeff Bezos loves coronavirus because it has helped him become the first person to ever have $200 billion.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Yes. In 2020, Jeff Bezos became the first man to ever be worth $200 billion. Congratulations, Jeff. But if there is one thing that is keeping Jeff up at night, no, it's not his extramarital affair and subsequent divorce. It is the fact that workers in one of his many warehouses, the backbone of Amazon's business model, have decided to form a union.
This card is about dignity, respect, and fair treatment in your workplace. It gives you the opportunity to say, hey, Amazon, we would like a seat at the table. And thank you, and we support you. AmazonUnion.org. And let them know it's time to make a difference. And we're here for you, not Amazon.
And it's coming in one of the reddest states in America, Alabama, a right-to-work state, specifically in a town called Bessemer, Alabama, which in 2019 was called the worst city to live in Alabama by a website called 24/7 Wall Street. It says, quote, based on a range of measures related to affordability, economy, quality of life, and community, Bessemer ranks as the worst city to live in Alabama. The violent crime rate in the small northern Alabama city of about 27,000 is a staggering 2,986 incidents per 100,000 people, nearly 6 times the state violent crime rate of 524 incidents per 100,000 people, and the poverty rate in Bessemer is a staggering 29.7%. And in March of this year, Amazon decided to open up a warehouse in Bessemer. They probably never expected that this warehouse was going to lead the first serious unionization campaign at the company since 2014. You see, Amazon is virulently anti-union. And while a lot of its European workers are unionized, all of Amazon's American employees are not. So it's hard to overstate just how dramatic it would be if these workers succeeded in their fight to unionize. So far, they've gotten past the first hurdle, getting enough of them to sign union authorization cards so that they can file with the National Labor Relations Board, which will then rule on whether they can vote. Should they succeed, they will strike a blow inside the corporation that is arguably the most dominant force in American life today. As CNBC's Jim Cramer hilariously points out in his next clip, Amazon is less a corporation and more of a corporate nation state.
Has Amazon not become a country during this period? It's putting a lot of people to work. It's got far-flung into many different businesses. It's got social policy. It's international diplomacy with France. I mean, I find that this is one, not only did Alphabet become a casualty of this, I think, but Amazon's become a huge beneficiary of this period. I mentioned Alphabet just because they said yesterday they're slowing down their hiring. Amazon increasing their hiring. Amazon is it's either the Grim Reaper for everyone or the greatest thing that's ever happened to the American consumer, or maybe both.
And he is right. Amazon is undeniably great from a consumer standpoint. but it is also the Grim Reaper. Because of its sheer size, it's been destroying business after business as it finds new industries to conquer. But the real victims of Amazon are not the myriad brick and mortar retailers it has burned to the ground, the workers who form the core of their business strategy, which is basically insanely fast delivery times.
You have security cameras right behind you at all times that are looking at you 24/7. And if you don't meet standards or the rates, you're out the door. You're just disposable.
Every worker has a scanner at all times that basically track exactly where you're at.
And they have a little blue line at the bottom of the screen. And it has like how many seconds that you have to have it done by the time it hits 0. And it puts you into panic mode.
And pretty much you can't talk to people. You can't be in the same aisle as them. You just constantly have to sit there scanning like a robot all day long. If they catch you not scanning, you get a write-up.
And what they're doing is they're producing this massive data that they are using to be able to analyze the entire workforce.
And Amazon has hired 427,300 workers this year alone. That comes out to a mind-boggling 1,400 new hires every single day. And because of its massive size, a unionization drive within Amazon would represent a seismic change in American politics and really American society as a whole. But of course, Amazon will do everything it can to thwart any unionization drive because, according to them, it's fine. Their workers are great. They don't need a union.
Amazon wouldn't tell us how long fulfillment center workers stay on the job or how often they're injured. But workers we spoke to say the rates are higher than other warehouses and that the company rebuffs attempts to unionize.
We do not believe unions are in the best interest of our customers, our shareholders, or most importantly, our associates.
This is a clip from a video the company says it used in the past to teach managers about employees' rights and labor laws.
The most obvious signs would include use of words associated with unions or union-led movements like living wage or steward.
Early on, Amazon took a position to basically be anti-union. Why was that decision made?
I don't think we made the decision to be anti-union. We just feel that all of the things that unions would want to get us to do, we've already done.
Yeah, they've already done it. Hey, remember how I said that COVID has been great for Amazon's profit and Jeff Bezos' net worth? Well, it's not like their workers have seen any of those gains or much of those gains. When the coronavirus first hit, the company announced that it was bumping up its pay by $2 an hour to keep their workers coming back, a sort of emergency hazard pay. But that ended in May, and the company has no plans to reinstate it. Meanwhile, as many as 20,000 Amazon workers have been infected with the virus, and when one employee staged a protest to try to implement safer conditions, he was fired.
Not a good look, and a lot of bad press is coming out of this for Amazon, unfortunately. One of their workers in Staten Island, he was a fulfillment center assistant manager. He was fired yesterday after staging a walkout in protest of the health conditions that were present there at that facility. His name is Chris Smalls, and he called the conditions, according to Bloomberg, horrific. He's been with the company for 4 years. He said that the workers were having to do their jobs with no masks, no gloves, and also there were no masks or gloves for the cleaning crews that were cleaning the facilities.
And in response, Amazon's general counsel had some choice words for Chris Smalls, the worker that was fired. He just wanted some basic safety precautions, but to Amazon's general counsel, that was just way too much. He said, quote, "He's not that smart or articulate, and to the extent that the press wants to focus on us versus him, we will be in a much stronger PR position than simply explaining for the umpteenth time how we're trying to protect workers," said David Zapolsky, Amazon's general counsel, in the meeting notes, which Vice News reports were forwarded throughout the company. "We should spend the first part of our response strongly laying out the case for why the organizers' conduct was immoral, unacceptable, and arguably illegal in detail, and only then follow with our usual talking points about worker safety," Zapolsky continued. "Make him the most interesting part of the story, and if possible, make him the face of the entire union organizing movement." So Just think about that for a second. The company makes more than $5 billion per quarter in profit, but its workers got a temporary increase of $2 an hour while risking their lives by working through a pandemic. But rest assured, if they had a union, Chris Smalls would not have been fired, and they'd be getting a much bigger chunk of those profits that are now going to fund Jeff Bezos' giant clock that will tick for 10,000 years. No, seriously, that's a real thing that he bought.
So tell me about a 10,000-year clock.
Okay, the 10,000-year clock is invented by a brilliant man named Danny Hillis. He invented this idea way back in 1984. And the idea is it's a symbol of long-term thinking. It's literally a mechanical clock of monumental scale being built inside of a mountain in West Texas, not far from Blue Origin's New Shepard launch site. And it, sort of, ticks once a day and, dongs once a century, and the cuckoo comes out once a millennium, that sort of thing.
The cuckoo comes out once a millennium. Yeah, it symbolizes long-term thinking. I get it, because it's a clock that goes for a long time. Anyway, Amazon is doing everything it can to bust this union. And to aid in their efforts, the company has hired the law firm Morgan, Lewis & Bockius, quote, the premier anti-union lawyers, according to Rebecca Givon, a labor studies professor at Rutgers University. Amazon used Morgan Lewis when it successfully fought off a union representation bid by a small group of equipment maintenance and repair technicians at its Middletown, Delaware warehouse in 2014. It also is turning to the playbook that companies often use to fight union drives, Givon said. One tactic, push to include more workers in the proposed bargaining unit to make it harder for the union to reach those workers. To file its NLRB notice, the RWDSU, the union that these Amazon workers are trying to join, needed to have cards authorizing it to represent workers in collective bargaining signed by at least 30% of the proposed negotiating unit, which it claims is 1,500 workers. Amazon, though, argued in its filing that the proposed unit totals are 5,723, though it didn't explain how it came to that figure. And the other trick that the company tried to pull was to delay the actual date of the vote to give it more time to organize its anti-union campaign and capitalize on campaign fatigue on the part of the workers. And they did just that. They asked the NLRB to delay the vote, which was scheduled for December 11th, to sometime after the holidays in January. But the NLRB somehow denied Amazon's petition, and now the vote will be held on December 18th, so mark your calendars. But more ominously, though, a leaked document obtained by Vice's motherboard showed that Amazon had hired Pinkerton spies to keep tabs on their unionized workers in Europe, and according to the source who leaked the documents, they're also using them in the United States.
Lauren Cowrie-Gurley is the staff writer who broke this story. When I spoke with her earlier, I asked her to explain what these documents say about how Amazon keeps an eye on employees.
It involves collecting data, it seems, from Facebook groups, from social media. In some cases, in the case of the Pinkertons, there is a line in one of the documents that we've obtained that says that Pinkerton operatives were inserted into a warehouse in Wrocław, Poland, to gather intelligence on what their warehouse workers were up to. They believe that some people were tinkering with the application interview process. So some people were sent in to figure out what was going on.
This leak focuses on Amazon's operations in Europe. How likely is it that the company is doing similar things in the U.S.?
So our source told us that they do the same thing in the U.S. They gather the same intelligence.
Yeah, as Al Swearingen said in Deadwood, the Pinkertons are just muscle for the bosses, as if they didn't have enough muscle already. Now, the story of these Amazon workers in Alabama trying to unionize has gotten little attention in the press outside of Alex Press at Jacobin. The only real coverage has come from the Washington Post, and it's been shockingly sympathetic to the union given the fact that Jeff Bezos himself owns the Washington Post. And the only major political figure to speak out in favor of the workers has been, of course, Bernie Sanders. When the news broke, he tweeted, "If Amazon workers in Alabama, a strong anti-union state, voted to form a union, it will be a shot heard around the world. If they can negotiate higher wages and better working conditions in the South, it will benefit every worker in America. I strongly support their efforts." And then he followed up with, All workers are entitled to decent wages and working conditions, which is why I stand with the Amazon warehouse workers in Alabama exercising their constitutional right to form a union. Mr. Bezos, the wealthiest person in America, must not interfere in this election. Remember, it was Bernie's relentless campaign in 2018 that contributed greatly to Amazon raising its minimum wage to $15 an hour. Now, Amazon is the second largest employer in the United States after Walmart, but if current trends continue, it will soon become the largest employer in the country. The chief executive is the richest man in the world and owns the newspaper of record in the capital of the most powerful country in world history. And he clearly has plans to some sort of world domination. He's got a 10,000-year clock, for God's sakes. And in a time when the left has suffered electoral defeat at the hands of neoliberal centrism, our main focus has to be to organize working class institutions that can exercise power. A union movement in the South within Amazon would be transformative in ways that we can scarcely imagine. It's an uphill battle for sure, but it does point the way forward.
That was great. Wow. It's kind of incredible how far these companies will go to spy on their employees, to squeeze every bit of what they refer to as productivity out of them, even at the expense of their health. And, the one thing that I wanted to just quickly mention was the 20,000 employees who got sick from coronavirus. It's so infuriating because at this point, it really is dependent on citizens and workers to demand change, which is why it's so important this is happening. Because when you look at congressional lawmakers, when you look at even Democratic leadership, they're very much willing to sign on to stimulus legislation that clears corporations of any liability associated with their employees getting sick from the virus. Yeah. Right. And you should keep that in mind, not just in regard to this Amazon story, but that story about the Tyson meatpacking plant that haunts me at night when I'm thinking about how these managers were literally upstairs taking bets on how many of their employees would get sick and potentially die from the virus. Human lives are not in any way valuable to them. And the turnover is so high because, hey, if you don't play ball, we'll just replace you with someone else. And yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention one other thing. It's also important to keep the third parties that get hired out to do the deliveries for Amazon as well, because they're certainly underpaid and their bodies go through a lot to deliver those packages. So, I'm glad that the warehouse workers in Alabama are organizing and doing something about the injustices that they've been experiencing at the workplace. But Amazon is so gigantic that their practices impact workers across the board, including those who are doing these deliveries.
Yeah, and it was, as I was researching this segment, I had to leave a bunch of stuff out, and because if not, it would have been too long. But just the stories of the working conditions in these Amazon warehouses are absolutely horrifying. There's cases of the average kind of Amazon fulfillment worker, and sometimes walks as much as 15 miles a day. As part walking up and down the warehouses. It's really horrific. And of course, Jeff Bezos and Amazon is kind of they're seen as kind of good liberals. They're in good standing with the Democratic Party and the sort of liberal establishment in America. He was anti-Trump. He clapped back on a few things and the liberals went crazy. And he really is Jeff Bezos to me is he's so clever at how he sticks his fingers in power in the levers of power to manipulate them. So there's this thing that I left out that I've thought about including, but it's he has this habit of donating to big charities, for example, using Amazon stock. Instead of cash, he uses Amazon stock, which means that the charities and these nonprofits now are interested in Amazon stock going up. Because it affects them. So he's tying the self-interest of these organizations, a lot of them good liberal organizations, into the success of Amazon. That's how he buys them off, essentially. It's not just a straight cash, play for play. It's literally hitching their fortunes to Amazon stock price. So
no, it's brilliant. It's actually a brilliant PR strategy.
It's
right?
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
because it includes the action that a lot of wealthy people in this country, like who have done horrific things, resort to launder their reputation. Right? They'll give to charities. They'll put their names on buildings on college campuses, all sorts of nonsense in order to look like they're the good guys. They're really helping. Oh, look at how philanthropic they are with their resources. Do we really need government regulation when we have all this philanthropy going on? But at the same time, he couples that with, you're right, the very vested interest that these charities are now going to have with the stock value going up.
Yeah. And the other thing that, like, there's been a lot of debate in the last few years around sort of monopoly versus anti-monopoly, and it seems very clear that that there is some sort of trend towards consolidation and larger firms with more power. And Amazon is kind of like the classic example of that. But in a way, the fact that they're so large makes them more vulnerable to something like a unionization drive, in the sense that they have to have all these workers in these warehouses. They can identify with each other. Like, if something happens in Alabama, then an Amazon fulfillment center in somewhere else in the country can be like, oh, look, they did it. Whereas if it was different, smaller, medium-sized companies, like, one unionization drive in any one of these wouldn't necessarily have the same kind of ripple effects. But because there's just one employer, like one node of power to like tickle, so to speak, if they're able to do that, then their ripple effect and their ability to exercise power is much greater. So in a way, they're like a victim of their own size, or a potential victim of their own size, because this hasn't happened yet. This is still like a very, very early stage, and I want to be clear, like these workers face a massive uphill battle. I mean, the vote is on December 18th. There's no guarantee that they will actually do it, and then it'll be interesting to see what happens after that if they do succeed, how Amazon responds. But it is the seeds of something. It is the sort of early seeds of something that could potentially be very transformative. Like I said, because Amazon is so big and powerful. Like, if you kind of take down the beast, well, it's easier to than to take down like a million smaller beasts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if you're an Amazon worker who's watching this right now, let us know what we can personally do to help, to mitigate some of the disinformation that's likely to come from your employers regarding unionizing. Because I think you're right. I mean, even if they fail in December, which I really hope they don't, it does plant a seed, right? And so I think that the will is there. It's just about, it's what we talk about all the time, making sure that we build institutions that can help kind of fight back against all the different dirty tricks that employers like Amazon are likely to play in order to discourage them from unionizing. I mean, we saw a lot of that in California when it came to Prop 22.
Yeah.
Don't think that Amazon isn't going to put as much money as possible behind squashing this effort.